There's a quiet kind of defeat that slips in unnoticed, almost invisible. It doesn't roar in with headlines or humiliation. It doesn't come from dramatic failures or explosive scandals. It creeps in subtly in how you speak, how you carry yourself, how your presence lands, or doesn't. And one day, without any clear sign, you're no longer someone they listen to. You're no longer someone they look toward. You're no longer someone they consider. The weight you once carried has evaporated, and worse, nobody tells you it happened. No one taps your shoulder and says, "You've lost your edge." They just stop giving you their attention, and once that happens, getting it back is 10 times harder. Machiavelli, the master of silent dominance, never feared being disliked. To him, hatred was still a form of power, proof that you were seen, noticed, considered dangerous. But to be invisible? That was death. To be overlooked meant people had taken your measure and found nothing to fear. No fire, no consequence, no gravity. The worst fate isn't being hated. It's being seen as irrelevant. No alarms go off when this shift begins. There's no dramatic moment to mark your fall. What happens instead is a slow leak, tiny, unnoticed habits that dilute your influence. Your voice loses authority. Your absence no longer causes a pause. The room forgets to shift when you walk in. It's not that you're doing something wrong in a loud way. It's that your presence has stopped commanding anything at all. And you never even noticed. Machiavelli knew that power isn't just something you possess. It's something people grant you based on how they feel when you're around. And when you unconsciously leak the signs that you're unsure, that you need validation, that you're desperate to be heard or liked, you train others to treat you as optional. And respect never survives optionality. This isn't about becoming feared in a loud, aggressive sense. It's not about turning into a tyrant or chasing intimidation. It's about becoming a man people cannot ignore even when you say nothing. A man whose presence shapes the room, who bends attention around him like gravity bends light. And most men? They give that away without ever knowing. It begins when you start sharing your plans before you've lived them. Every time you tell someone what you're about to do, what you're thinking, what you're working toward, you start a clock in their mind. They expect proof. And if it doesn't arrive quickly and clearly, your words get filed under fantasy. You think you're being transparent, but all they hear is, "He talks more than he acts." And that alone is enough to poison the weight of your word. Machiavelli would say, power doesn't lie in the promise. It lives in the result. If you make declarations before you've built anything, you position yourself as someone who needs external belief more than internal certainty. You're not inspiring anyone. You're asking for pre-approval, and in doing so, you teach people to stop believing in your ability to deliver. The ones who hold true authority don't advertise their path. They simply walk it, and when they arrive, they don't shout. They let others talk about what they've done. That's the difference between a man who seeks recognition and one who demands it through results. Another quiet leak is the urge to explain yourself when no one asked for an explanation. It seems harmless, a way to clarify your intentions or correct a misunderstanding. But every unsolicited explanation is a confession that you're not sure your actions can speak for you, that you don't trust your decisions to be understood on their own. Machiavelli never explained. He let results handle perception. If someone misunderstood his purpose, he stayed still. He let time erase doubt, not words. But when you rush to correct how you're seen, when you need people to get you immediately, you signal something far worse than confusion. You signal that you lack conviction, that you're nervous your choices won't land the way you hoped. And once that's seen, it cannot be unseen. The moment you start justifying what you did, you grant power to those questioning you. You shrink, you bend. You become the man asking for approval in a room where he once led without permission, and the room responds, not with applause, with indifference. Then there's the eager laughter, the quick smile, the constant nodding in conversation. You think it shows warmth, that it makes people feel safe, that being friendly builds admiration. But respect does not grow in the soil of over-availability. It grows in restraint. When you laugh at every joke, even the ones veiled in insult, when you respond too fast, too eagerly to every comment or glance, when your body is always leaning in, always signaling, please like me, you don't look relaxed. You look desperate, submissive, small. Machiavelli understood that real presence doesn't chase connection. It holds ground and lets others come to it. He would never give you all of his emotion for free. A slow smile, a delayed reaction, a deliberate pause, that's what makes people lean in. When your face reveals little, others fill in the blanks. They assume depth. And when people start imagining who you are, they also start respecting who they think you might be. Over-apologizing is another deadly habit. You say you're sorry for being late, sorry for sharing an idea, sorry for interrupting, even when there's no real offense. But every unnecessary apology is a quiet act of self-subtraction. What you're really saying is, I don't feel I belong in this moment. You think you're being polite. But what people hear is that you feel unworthy. True strength doesn't cower through language. It acknowledges what must be fixed and moves forward. It doesn't seek comfort in validation. It doesn't beg for forgiveness when none is owed. It simply corrects and continues. And in doing so, it teaches others, this man may bend, but he never breaks beneath his own weight. Machiavelli would watch a man flood the room with apologies and see surrender, not in anger or defeat, but in posture. Because the moment your language becomes overly gentle, overly cautious, overly compliant, the room shifts. And it doesn't shift toward you. It shifts away. You're no longer the center of energy. You're just reacting to it. Respect isn't something you lose in a dramatic moment. It erodes in the spaces between your words. You step into a meeting and no one pauses. You speak and people interrupt without pause. You give input and it lands like a feather instead of a thunderclap. Not because you're wrong, but because your presence doesn't carry momentum anymore. That's not about logic. That's about the invisible signals you've been broadcasting for years. Every glance, every gesture, every silence either reinforces your influence or reduces it. And the tragic part, you're not even aware you're training others how to treat you. You're just reacting, filling gaps, chasing harmony. And harmony without boundaries is just noise. Take silence, for instance. There's a pause in the room. Tension lingers, and you jump in, cracking a joke, smoothing it over, giving the group relief. You think you've helped, but what you've done is trained everyone to expect that you'll be the first to fold. You've proven you can't hold pressure, and pressure is where dominance lives. Machiavelli held silence like a blade. When tension rose, he leaned into it. He let the pause stretch, let the discomfort build, and in that vacuum, others shifted. They changed tone. They hesitated. Because silence held with confidence is a force. It commands attention not by demand, but by gravity. And gravity doesn't ask. It pulls. Then there's the worst kind of leak, the emotional twitch. You don't raise your voice, but you react. A sigh, a roll of the eyes, a glance that betrays how deeply a comment cut. Someone mocks you subtly and you laugh, but it's strained. Someone ignores you and you repeat yourself, just a bit louder. Someone challenges you and you start over-explaining, hoping to patch the hole. But every one of those small tells is a spotlight on your fragility. Machiavelli would say, "The moment they can touch your emotion, they own you." And he's right. The strongest men are not those who fight every slight. It's those who look completely untouched by it, not because they didn't feel it, but because they didn't flinch. Disrespect, especially in public, is not met with defense. It's met with silence, stillness, precision, a pause that lasts just a beat too long, a glance that says, "That was your one shot." And when others see that you are not moved, not rattled, not pulled into reaction, they hesitate the next time, not out of fear, out of uncertainty. And uncertainty is the birthplace of power. If you find yourself saying something twice because no one heard you the first time, you've already lost. Repeating yourself is not strength. It's chasing validation. It's begging the room to catch up to your thoughts. But true weight isn't repeated. It lands once and it echoes. If your point doesn't strike, it wasn't ready to. You don't rephrase, you retreat. And in that retreat, the silence becomes the punishment. They feel it. They notice what they missed. And next time, they'll listen harder. Another trap, always searching for eye contact. You think it shows interest, that it builds trust. But when you're the one always scanning, always nodding, always seeking that moment of shared glance, you're not being present. You're looking for permission to be. Machiavelli didn't search eyes. He made others search his. His gaze didn't ask to be met. It simply existed, and others moved into it or shrank from it. That's the difference between watching and being watched. The man who holds his attention lightly, who withholds his validation, who doesn't nod or smile on command, that's the man people are just around. Because true respect doesn't chase connection. It allows it when earned. You can be intelligent, charismatic, even right, and still be ignored, because what people follow is not your facts, it's your presence. If the energy you bring is full of gaps, apologies, and eagerness, they'll overlook you, not out of cruelty, but because you've made it easy to do so. Machiavelli understood that reclaiming presence isn't done with speeches. It's done by removing every behavior that leaks insecurity, and that process begins not by adding more, but by subtracting everything that makes you easy to dismiss. Power is not something people donate to you like a gift basket. It is something they offer quietly, because not offering it feels dangerous, and that begins with your absence, not dramatic, not angry, just less accessible. The man who's always available, always present, always ready to chime in, becomes forgettable, not because he's lacking, but because he's everywhere. And what's everywhere becomes background noise. Machiavelli's wisdom was clear. Disappear with purpose. People don't lose respect because they dislike you. They lose it because they forget to consider you. You become too easy to access, too predictable, too eager to be seen. And in that, your value dissolves. The antidote is distance, not coldness, but composure. Pull back from constant engagement. Be the one who doesn't jump into every discussion. Be the one who doesn't respond instantly. Delay your presence until it feels earned. When you speak less, when your reactions arrive slower, when your presence becomes a variable instead of a constant, people recalibrate. They start observing again. They begin waiting again. And waiting is where power builds. The man who doesn't speak every time the room turns to him is the man whose words land heavier when he finally does. Correction too becomes more potent when it's devoid of emotion. When someone disrespects you, the weak response is noise, an outburst, a snarky comeback, a defensive explanation. But Machiavelli taught a colder art. True control is in the stillness, a slight lean back, a stare that lingers a beat too long, an unchanged tone that cuts sharper than any insult. That's how the room learns. You didn't escalate. You shifted, and that shift recalibrates the entire space. People don't fear volume, they fear contrast. If you're warm, then suddenly cold, not rudely but indifferently, they feel it. The chill settles in the room, and that absence of connection is louder than any shouted word. You didn't attack, you simply moved into calculation. And calculation, when done silently, makes the world pause. Predictability is the enemy of presence. Most men are easy to read. Praise them, and they light up. Question them, and they start explaining. Insult them, and they defend. But power is found in unpredictability. You delay your smile. You pause when expected to reply. You don't nod on cue. And in that space between what they expected and what you offered, a question grows. What is he thinking? Machiavelli wielded silence like a scalpel. He allowed discomfort to stretch. He made others earn his reaction. And when he finally responded, it never matched their timing. It matched his own. That's when people stop treating you like a peer and start treating you like a force. Learn to say no, softly, calmly, and without justification. When you say yes to everything, your time becomes cheap. Your presence becomes disposable. People don't respect the man who's always available. They rely on him, use him, thank him, but they do not revere him. Machiavelli understood that every agreement costs something, and if there's no cost to your yes, your value plummets. You must become the man whose yes means something, because it comes after thought, not pressure. The man whose no doesn't need to be explained, justified, defended. It simply stands. At first, people may be thrown off. They'll ask again, push again, but eventually they'll adjust. And the moment people adjust around your boundaries instead of trying to break them, you've won. The quiet twist? The rarer your agreement, the more people treasure it. Your approval becomes currency. Your time becomes a privilege. That's the leverage of controlled distance. There is no shortcut to being respected. No quick trick. No single phrase that opens all doors. What exists instead is atmosphere. The atmosphere you carry, the edge you install through careful subtraction. You stop giving every reaction. You stop explaining every move. You stop showing up for every invitation. You vanish not to escape, but to sharpen. Machiavelli wasn't feared because he chased power. He was feared because his absence left a gap that others couldn't fill. You must become the same. The man who disappears and returns changed, quieter, sharper, unreadable. The man who no longer explains, but simply exists on a higher frequency. You're not trying to teach people who you are. You're showing them who you've become. And who you've become doesn't apologize for the upgrade. He doesn't ask for others to catch up. He simply walks at his own pace and lets the room adjust. The key is in stillness. The slower you move, the more tension builds. Everyone else is sprinting to be heard. You, instead, walk like you own the ground beneath you. Your gaze is steady. Your tone is flat. You're not emotionless, but your rhythm isn't dictated by the room. And when the tempo of your presence breaks the social pattern, everyone feels it. Machiavelli knew. People fear the man who disrupts rhythm without needing to speak. You become a disruption not through noise, but through absence of it. You pause longer than expected. You walk away before the conversation ends. You end eye contact before it becomes mutual. These are not accidents. These are messages. And the message is, I do not bend to your cues. You bend to mine. You never speak to fill air. That's what the desperate do. They fear the quiet. They jump in with stories, jokes, ideas, anything to keep the spotlight on them. But the man of gravity fears the opposite. He fears diluting his words. So he waits. He waits until the moment matters. And then He speaks with a kind of finality that ends discussion, not opens it. People begin to lean in. They begin to brace themselves when you open your mouth. Not out of fear, out of expectation. That's what respect feels like. It's not fear of you, it's fear of disappointing you, of not measuring up to the weight your presence imposes on them. Do not defend yourself. Redirection is the weapon of those who truly hold ground. If someone mocks you publicly, do not meet their tone. Instead, ask them to clarify slowly, not sarcastically, curiously. If they challenge you, let silence stretch until they squirm in their own words. If they accuse you, let them sit with it. Your lack of defense will unnerve them more than any counterattack. Machiavelli would say, a man who responds with curiosity instead of defense is a man who's already won the exchange. They expected you to flinch. You didn't. You just stared back. And suddenly, the power dynamics flipped. Speak with conclusion, not explanation. Most people ramble. They use a dozen words to say what could have landed in 5, and every extra word is a crack in their credibility. You say, we won't do it that way again. Not, I just think we maybe need to consider some better strategies. You say, if they misunderstood, they weren't listening. Not, I think I didn't communicate it well. Machiavelli's words felt like endings, not openings. That's what gave them weight. You're not asking to be understood. You're declaring your stance. And declarations don't beg for applause. They just land and echo. Exit without notice. Most men wait for permission to leave a room. They linger, waiting for cues, for polite farewells. But the one who exits first, with intention, without spectacle, owns the timing. You don't need a closing statement. Your withdrawal is the statement. Whether in meetings, conversations, relationships, or simple eye contact, the man who controls his exit controls perception. You don't overstay. You don't explain your departure. You simply vanish once your presence has served its purpose. That absence teaches more than presence ever could. Respect does not begin with applause. It begins with discomfort, with the pressure of someone who doesn't conform, who doesn't chase approval, who doesn't need the room to get him. Machiavelli didn't beg to be followed. He moved like a storm that others couldn't predict, and that unpredictability became legend. You've seen the behaviors that bleed power: oversharing, oversmiling, overspeaking, overstaying. But now you install the opposites: stillness, pause, distance, finality. These are not tactics, they are traits. And once they become habits, you no longer ask for space. Space is made around you. Let your presence break patterns. Let your voice arrive like it's been earned. Let your silence build tension instead of awkwardness. And above all, let others wonder. Wonder what you're thinking. Wonder what you'll say. Wonder why you haven't spoken. Because the moment they wonder, you've already won. Machiavelli didn't demand space. He took it by giving less of himself. Not in bitterness, in discipline, not in rejection, in refinement. That is the game. Not to shout louder, but to be the quiet that interrupts the noise. And once you do, they will adjust. They always do. Because when you become unreadable, unchaseable, unshakable, you become unforgettable. That's the final level of respect, the one they can't take back